The morning sun blazed across Velmont Ridge precision grounds, casting sharp shadows between the gleaming white shooting benches. High in the Colorado hills, the private range hummed with money and arrogance. Drone cameras floated overhead like mechanical vultures, capturing every angle for the live streams that would broadcast the VX9 challenge to paying viewers worldwide. Rachel Donovan stepped out of a dusty shuttle van, her worn jeans and faded canvas jacket a stark contrast to the designer tactical gear surrounding her. While other competitors arrived in luxury SUVs with personal assistants carrying custom rifle cases, Rachel carried nothing but herself. The issued equipment would be waiting at the line, same as everyone else's, supposedly. The moment her name flashed on the randomized schedule board, the commentary began. "Rachel Donovan," the announcer's voice crackled over the loudspeaker, sterile and detached. "Shooter 1, lane 3. A ripple of laughter spread across the elevated viewing deck. Marcus Webb, a social media influencer with mirrored sunglasses and a TACOPS media badge, tilted his head toward his camera. "Warm-up act in boots and flannel," he said, loud enough for his followers to hear. Another voice chimed in. "Start with the easy one." At the far end of the terrace, a sponsor's live stream screen blinked with a caption that made Rachel's stomach tighten. "Opening round sacrifice." She didn't react. She'd learned long ago that responding to mockery only fed it. Instead, she walked toward lane 3 in silence, her pace steady and deliberate. Around her, shoulders turned subtly, phones tilted, and half-muffled chuckles followed, like a trail of breadcrumbs marking her path. No one knew her name. No one asked. She wasn't stopped, but she was already dismissed. What they didn't know, what they couldn't know, was that Rachel had helped design the very course they were about to shoot. Years ago, she'd worked out of a converted barn in the high desert, teaching teenagers how to fire safely, how to breathe through recoil, how to respect distance and timing. She'd created the dynamic drills and staggered target systems that Velmont was now built on. But when corporate money swept in to fund and franchise her methods, Rachel was quietly erased. The training manual bore someone else's name. The promotional videos blurred her old location. She'd signed no contracts, held no titles, just the quiet satisfaction of work well done. One photo remained, half her face visible beside a chalkboard, drawing zone patterns that would later become the foundation of competitive shooting. She never fought the erasure. Instead, she took what remained and opened her own range outside Fort Collins. It was quiet, affordable, and hard to find unless you were looking for something honest. Now, at Velmont, some of the same faces that had once gathered around her dusty teaching table stood just yards away, either not recognizing her or pretending not to. Cole Martinez, who'd once been her assistant on target timing systems, saw her across the firing lane. His smile faltered for half a second before he turned away without a word. A younger man with perfectly styled hair and expensive gear walked past her station. "You want a hand adjusting that grip before you sprain something?" he said with a wide grin, waiting for a reaction from his buddies. Rachel offered none. Her hands stayed still. The man's laugh trailed off as he rejoined his group, suddenly unsure why his joke hadn't landed. As she approached lane 3, Rachel felt the familiar hum in her chest. Not nerves, but alignment. Not anticipation, but clarity. Her name had been called. She would fire first. They didn't know her, didn't remember, had no idea what it cost to stand still under 1,000 eyes, and give them nothing back. They didn't need to know, because the moment was coming and she'd always understood that when it did, she wouldn't have to explain a thing. The central firing corridor at Velmont Ridge was engineered for spectacle. 5 pristine white bays stretched in perfect symmetry along a steel-railed platform, each equipped with identical black shooting tables and backlit digital displays. 200 meters of rocky red earth sloped toward the target field, where 10 white steel plates gleamed under. The Colorado sun, some targets were stationary. Others were rigged to swing, drop, or disappear according to randomized sequences embedded in the challenge's software. The rules were simple. 10 targets, 45 seconds, open-sight VX9 rifles. No scopes, no bipods, no excuses. Drones floated. Overhead like glass-eyed insects, each broadcasting to different VIP lounges across the facility. From the elevated observation deck, guests in tailored range sipped sparkling water and scrolled through social feeds, half watching the setup unfold. Behind the soundproof glass staging area, Rachel stood alone in absolute quiet. The heavy seal muffled even the drone hum outside. A small monitor displayed rotating text, "Next shooter, Rachel Donovan." She kept her eyes low, unmoved. No earbuds, no warm-up routine, no rehearsed trigger pulls. She'd been standing like this for nearly 10 minutes, not hesitating, just waiting. Outside the glass, the volume rose. "You see her boots?" someone said. "Looks like she hiked here from a farm." $5 says she can't even clear 2 zones, another added. Marcus Webb used his phone to film her through the glass partition. "She doesn't even blink," he whispered to his camera. "It's honestly creepy." Just beyond the door, a Velmont staffer scrolled through the registration list with a slight frown. "We have a Donovan on here," he asked another tech. "She's not on the competition board from last year." The other shrugged. "Might be an internal PR slot. Just let it ride." Through it all, Rachel kept her hands loosely at her sides, fingers curled inward as though feeling for a familiar rhythm. She could smell the faint tang of oiled steel from the corridor and the metallic dust rising from the range. Her breath came evenly. Nothing in her posture suggested tension, only readiness. Then her bay lit green. Zone 3. A soft chime sounded, just audible through the seal. "She's up," someone muttered. Rachel stepped forward as the range assistant opened the chamber door. The sun had dropped low enough to hit the steel plates dead on, making them gleam like polished teeth against the dirt, nearly blinding when caught from the wrong angle. On her right, a young man in a red vest checked. The weapon on the table, magazine seated, chamber empty, safety engaged. Everything standard. Rachel approached without acknowledging him. No wave, no word. The VX-9 sat ready. It was a clean weapon with aggressive but elegant lines, matte black over a polymer frame designed for elite use. The rifle was lauded for its light recoil and consistent zeroing. No one here could claim it was the gear. It was an equalizer. Everyone had the same tools. The only variable was who held it. Rachel picked it up without pausing. Her hand closed over the grip naturally, and she brought it up slightly, testing the weight with a soft tilt of the barrel before letting it rest. "Is she even going to sight it?" a spectator muttered. "She didn't even look through it. God, this is going to be a disaster." The air changed, not dramatically, but something in the texture of the range shifted. The quiet was no longer casual. It was drawn tight like a bowstring. Rachel stepped behind the line and planted her feet. The digital clock blinked. "Eze was the house." To her left, the targets glowed in the late light. 10 of them, bright and bare. 2 static, 3 on slight hinges, 1 set to swing in a full arc, another designed to disappear and reappear mid-sequence. The announcer's voice cut through the air, flat and distant. "Shooter ready. Bay 3. Challenge begins in 3, 2, 1. The buzzer sounded. The instant the buzzer cracked through the canyon air, Rachel moved. The VX-9 rose smoothly to her shoulder without rush, without hesitation. Her breath narrowed, her right eye locked down the sights, and the first shot rang out like a dropped pane of glass. The steel target in Zone 1 jumped, white paint flaking. Into the air. She pivoted without delay. Zone 2. 2 targets, 1 stationary, 1 angled left. She didn't adjust her footing, just shifted her weight and fired twice more. 2 sharp cracks, 2 metallic pings, 3 shots down, and she was still moving. The air around her was dead quiet except for the sharp echo of bullet meeting plate, the sound folding into silence before starting again. Zone 3's swinging target crept out on its timer. Rachel paused, not too long, just long enough to let it reach its far edge before swinging back toward center. Her 4th shot rang out, meeting the plate mid-arc. It dropped clean. A spectator in the gallery exhaled hard, barely audible behind the viewing glass. Rachel didn't notice, or didn't need to. Her fifth shot fired without a sound from her breath. Then her sixth. Steel rang like distant bells. Zone 4. 2 targets, one lower than the rest. Her hands didn't tremble. The VX-9 followed her eyes. One then the other fell in rapid succession. Now the final zone. Target 9 stood still. Target 10 hovered just above the dirt, swinging with a random delay. Rachel waited, not with tension, but with understanding. It dipped, bobbed left, then stilled for less than half a second. She fired. The plate spun sideways and slammed flat. With a heavy clang. 10 shots, 10 hits. The timer stopped at 38.2 seconds. Rachel lowered the rifle and rested it gently on the bench, muzzle pointed downrange. Her posture didn't change. Her jaw stayed relaxed, her expression unreadable. In the silence that followed, no one moved. No one clapped. Behind the viewing glass, Marcus Webb's camera was still rolling, but his commentary had died in his throat. The man who joked about her grip stood frozen, his mouth slightly open. The betting app on someone's phone showed the odds crashing in real time. Rachel turned, walked off the line, and left the VX-9 exactly where it was. Still warm, still spotless, untouched by anything except purpose. Behind her, the scoreboard blinked once. Rachel Donovan, 10 hits, 38.2 seconds. No commentary, no correction. Just 10 empty plates and the last whisper of dust trailing behind her final shot. The final ping still echoed faintly over the range when Rachel stepped off the line. The wind caught her jacket as she walked away, slow, silent, without looking back at the targets or pausing for the display to flash her score. Nobody spoke at first. The silence wasn't awkward, it was paralyzing. The kind of quiet that drains confidence from a room like oxygen from a vacuum. The first man scheduled to shoot next, David Torres from Phoenix, checked his badge twice and adjusted his vest. A tech waved him forward. "Lane 2," the assistant called out, voice clipped. Torres looked at the empty firing bay, then back at the still settling steel plates. "I'll go after," he said. Not a stammer, not a joke, just flat avoidance. The next shooter in line, tall and polished with a known name in competitive long range, took one step toward his rifle, then stopped. He pulled the sling from his shoulder and unclipped the holster at his thigh. Without a word, he simply left his gear on the bench and walked toward the exit, head down. "This is rigged," someone whispered near the back. "I'm not being measured." "Against that," another replied. Rachel's name flashed across the digital leaderboard for the first time. Rachel Donovan, 10 hits, 38.2 seconds. A murmur stirred through the crowd. Not outrage, not questions, just an almost childlike confusion, like they were witnessing something that bent the rules of what they thought they understood. In the sponsor tent, a junior assistant from Luxor. Tactical sat staring at his tablet. Something about Rachel's face nagged at him. He pulled up a private archive from a prototype trial 6 years ago, back before the Velmont format had been finalized. The photo was grainy, a row of instructors standing near a chalkboard, each with a clipboard. On the far right, partly shadowed by glare, was a woman with the same face, same stance, same silence. No label beneath her name, just a date and a file name that read Phase Zero Motion Drill Logic. "Wait, is that her?" a man behind him asked, leaning in. The assistant nodded, his eyes still on the screen. She was on the design team. She helped write the timing standards. A few feet away, one of the older advisors, someone who'd consulted during the earliest days of the VX-9 calibration protocols, put down his headset. He stared through the glass where Rachel had stood moments before. "She didn't just shoot that. Of course," he said quietly, "she helped build it." Two men nearby shifted awkwardly. Their laughter from earlier now sat thick in the air, curdled and sour. One of them opened his phone and scrolled through his recent uploads. After a long pause, he tapped the clip labeled Opening Round Sacrifice and deleted it. At the far end of the lounge, the youngest shooter at the event, barely 25, quiet since arrival, sat alone on a bench with his rifle laid across his knees. He'd watched Rachel's entire run without saying a word. Now he whispered to no one in particular, She made the rules. No one answered him. Not because they disagreed, but because saying anything at all now felt like stepping out of turn. Marcus. Webb, who'd been filming and joking since Rachel arrived, pulled out his phone again, not to create content, but to re-watch the footage. He slowed it down, studied her trigger work, her breathing, the fraction of time between the swing and the shot. No pause, he muttered to himself. No correction. Across the floor, another sponsor leaned close to an event staffer. "Take the post down," he said urgently. "The caption about the sacrifice. Delete it now." The staffer obeyed without question. On the event feed, the clip vanished. In its place, the screen filled with the leaderboard, Rachel's name still burning quietly at the top. Outside, the wind stirred again. A few rifles remained untouched on the benches, their owners seated nearby with arms crossed and faces drawn. No one reached for their ear protection. No one moved toward the line. Rachel was gone, already off the range, already out of view. The equipment she'd left behind stayed arranged as if untouched. Clean rifle, empty chamber, spent brass neatly set to the side. No signature, no trophy, just results. What replaced the arrogance wasn't fear, and it wasn't even shame. It was something deeper, a kind of reverence none of them had prepared for. She hadn't said a word, but every man who'd spoken about her was now rearranging the memory, trying to rewrite their part, soften their lines, pretend they'd known or at least suspected, but they hadn't. And now they did. The range stayed quiet long after the last shot, not just still, but quiet in a way that felt deliberate. The crowd didn't return to small talk. The cameras stayed focused on nothing in particular, drifting across the empty firing line where no one volunteered to take a turn. Rachel walked without hurry along the perimeter of the staging area. She didn't speak, didn't glance back toward the screen that now bore her name at the top of the leaderboard. Rachel Donovan, 10 hits, 38.2 seconds. The numbers blinked once and held. No one challenged them. No one wanted to. Near the entrance, to the viewing tent, a man in a sharp charcoal jacket stepped into her path. His badge read, Strat Edge Defense, one of the lead co-sponsors of the event. He smiled like someone offering a contract wrapped in flattery. "We'd love to make you the face of the VX9, he said smoothly. "Marketing appearances could be global." He extended a business card with a confident hand, already expecting her to accept it. Rachel looked at the card, then looked past it. She didn't take it. The man hesitated, lips parting like he might follow up with a different offer, but she was already moving again. Tom Vaughn, the event host, intercepted her just as she reached the exit gate. His voice was lower now, measured with more caution than earlier. "I had no idea," he said, almost apologetic. Rachel stopped just long enough to meet his eyes. "You weren't meant to," she replied, then kept walking. Back under the canopy, one of the younger shooters, his branded vest too big for his frame, his eyes still fixed on footage playing back in slow motion, stood as she passed. He looked unsure of himself, humbled in a way that made his voice falter. "Would you ever train someone like me?" he asked. Rachel paused. "There's no shortcut to breath control," she said. Her tone wasn't cruel. It was even steady, final. She kept walking. Behind her, the viewing tent was filled with people watching the same 45 seconds on repeat. No one spoke as the pings echoed again and again through the speakers. They leaned in, counting the transitions, analyzing her posture, the smoothness of her pivot. One man held his phone an inch from his face, recording the recording. No one had noticed that Rachel never collected her name badge. It sat clipped to the registration table, half curled at the edge from the wind. At the firing bay, she paused, just long enough to reach down and gather the 10 pieces of spent brass she'd left behind. She didn't pocket them. She simply held them in her palm for a moment, then set them in a line on the edge of the table, spaced precisely 2 inches apart. No press approached her for comment. They'd made her the punchline earlier. Now no one was brave enough to ask her anything. The story had shifted too far, too fast. Somewhere behind her, another sponsor asked, "Is she coming back for the trophy shot?" No one answered. They all knew she wouldn't. The cameras panned across the line again, still waiting for the next shooter. None stepped forward. The range stayed cold. The challenge stayed open. Rachel walked off the field the same way she'd entered, alone, unnoticed by the crowd until it was too late, until the noise stopped and the silence became a mirror. And then she was gone. The roadside diner sat just past the highway turnoff where the hills dropped away and the landscape stretched open and flat. Its windows were dusty, the kind that dulled the afternoon light, and the cracked vinyl booths still smelled faintly of grease and sun-faded leather. A neon sign blinked in half-hearted rhythm near the register. The only sounds inside were the slow scrape of a fork against a plate and the hum of a ceiling fan that had long since given up keeping proper time. At the counter, a man in a ball cap scrolled his phone with one hand and stirred his coffee with the other. "Some woman just cleaned out Velmont Ridge," he said to the cook, holding out the screen. 10 for 10. Nobody even followed her. The cook didn't take the phone. He just glanced toward the far corner booth. Rachel sat there alone, the same faded canvas jacket hugged around her shoulders. Her rifle case leaned against the vinyl seat beside her, streaked with dust from the range. She held a half-empty mug in both hands, not reading, not watching, just sitting in the quiet like she'd always belonged to it. "That her?" the cook asked low. The man at the counter didn't answer. Maybe he didn't need to. Rachel finished her coffee and set the mug down with care. She stood, adjusted the strap on the rifle case, and placed a folded bill on the table beneath the sugar shaker. No tip line, no name, just the crease of something final. She walked to the door without hurry. The bell above it rang once as it opened, then again as it closed behind her. The booth emptied. The case was gone. The bill remained. And no one said her name aloud. Back at Velmont Ridge, the silence had taken on a life of its own. Word spread through the tactical gear community like wildfire, but not in the way these events usually did. There were no celebration posts, no victory montages, no sponsor highlights. Instead, there were deletions. Marcus Webb's TAC Ops Media channel, which had been live streaming the mockery, went dark for 6 hours. When it came back online, the footage from Lane 3 was gone. In its place was a simple statement: "Technical difficulties interrupted our coverage of an exceptional shooting demonstration." The official Velmont social media accounts scrubbed any reference to sacrifice rounds or warm-up acts. The professional photography team discovered that somehow, inexplicably, their memory cards had been corrupted during Rachel's run. Only the scoreboard remained as evidence. Those numbers that wouldn't lie, wouldn't disappear, wouldn't let them pretend it hadn't happened. David Torres, the shooter who'd backed down after Rachel's performance, drove straight home to Phoenix without firing a single round. He spent the 3-hour drive thinking about the woman who'd made shooting look like breathing, and when he got home, he quietly sold his competition rifles. "I'm done pretending," he told his wife when she asked why. The young shooter who'd asked Rachel about training found himself outside Fort Collins 2 weeks later, driving slowly past a weathered sign that read, "High Desert Training, by appointment only." He sat in his car for 20 minutes gathering courage before finally knocking on the door of a converted barn. Rachel answered, unsurprised. "I brought my own rifle this time," he said. She nodded and stepped aside to let him in. 3 months later, the VX9 Challenge tried to continue its season, but something fundamental had broken. Sponsors pulled out quietly, citing budget reallocations. The remaining events drew smaller crowds, and the shooting was different, more cautious, less certain. The swagger was gone. Tom Vaughn attempted one last event in Nevada, but when the registration opened, something unprecedented happened. 17 shooters signed up using variations of R. Donovan as their display names. None of them were Rachel, but the message was clear. The event was canceled. Rachel's range outside Fort Collins, meanwhile, had a quiet waiting list. She didn't advertise, didn't maintain a website, didn't post on social media. Students found her through whispered recommendations, the way people find the best teachers, through results, not marketing. She still wore the same faded canvas jacket. She still said little, but the young shooters who came to her learned something. The Velmont crowd never understood. That true skill doesn't announce itself, doesn't need applause, doesn't require recognition to be real. Late one evening, as Rachel locked up the barn after a long day of teaching breath control and respect for distance, she found an envelope tucked under her truck's windshield wiper. Inside was a cashier's check for more money than she'd see in 5 years, along with a note written in expensive ink on heavy paper for the training protocols we borrowed. With apologies for the delay in payment. VR management. Rachel looked at the check for a long moment, then folded it carefully and put it in her jacket pocket. Not because she needed their money now, but because it was an admission, an acknowledgement. A small but important piece of the truth finally surfaced. She drove home through the Colorado darkness, past the highway turnoff where a roadside diner still served coffee to travelers who didn't know they'd witnessed something extraordinary. The neon sign still blinked its half-hearted rhythm. The booth where she'd sat still held the memory of perfect silence. Some victories don't need fanfare. Rachel Donovan had walked into a world built to overlook her, armed with nothing but skill, patience, and silence. They'd laughed before she fired, they'd frozen after she finished. She hadn't stayed to explain, she hadn't needed to. Her value was never tied to applause. It was measured in the stillness she carried, in the shot that didn't miss, in the moment. No one else could follow. This is a story about self-worth that doesn't ask for permission, about walking away before they remember your name and leaving something behind they'll never forget. In the high desert of Colorado, where the wind carries the memory of perfect shots and quiet victories, Rachel Donovan continues to teach what can't be bought, the understanding that excellence speaks for itself, and the strongest people are often the ones who never need to raise their voice. Sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is let your work speak for itself, then walk away in silence. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to hit the subscribe button and become a part of our Everyday Life Stories community. Where are you watching from? Drop a comment below. We love hearing from our amazing viewers around the world.